Thank you. And after the lab was all put together, I invited my friend Chip Sweeney from Atlanta. Do we have any Southeastern folks here at least? There must be a bunch of you. Chip is one of the pastors at Perimeter Church right here in Atlanta and leads a group called Unite, which is about 100+ churches that are doing a similar kind of thing to us in Portland as far as mobilizing the body of Christ to serve and meet needs. So I wanted another example, and plus he's the timekeeper and kind of may ask a few of the questions, just kind of keep us on track. I'm going to go ahead and jump in real quickly at the beginning and just paint a little bit of the history of it, introducing a video that ABC World News with Diane Sawyer did in a minute. They'll kind of paint the picture quickly so that then we can just have a conversation about how does this work? How in a very proudly progressive city with the first openly gay mayor of a top 40 city in the evangelical community, how in the environment we live now, how can you have bridges built and just how does that work? The quick story for us in our Portland context, it's probably not that different from what some of you experience, and that is we as the evangelical community in Portland realized that we were known for what we were against and not what we were for. And we had never done the very obvious thing, which I'm kind of embarrassed that we hadn't done for decades, of just plain meeting with the mayor to humbly say we recognize how we're viewed. We're sad about that. We know you may not have trust initially, but if you give us a chance, we would like to come up with maybe 15,000 volunteers. This is kind of building up toward the summer of 2008, where we were going to have one of these Palau festivals, a big outdoor event with Toby Mac and Skillet and Kirk Franklin, etc. We thought if we had a community service effort as part of that process, the best way to do that would be to meet with the city and say, what needs are there that we could help meet if we had 15,000 volunteers? And the city graciously worked with us on coming up with identifying hunger and homelessness, healthcare, public school partnerships, and the environment initially as 5 areas. And so we began working on this idea of a community-wide season of service that the city of Portland and at that point, Mayor-elect Adams would kind of declare, and then the churches under that umbrella would go out and just be the hands and feet of Christ and do all sorts of things to try to just begin to do the right things regardless and maybe begin to repair some bridges. So to cut a long story short, it just went way beyond our expectation and has created a lot of unusual partnerships that we'll be talking about. But maybe the best way to start this whole thing going is just let's watch a little video from ABC World News with Diane Sawyer.
Evangelical leader Kevin Palau was so eager to fix this that he reached out to a highly unlikely partner. Hello, Portland! The openly gay mayor of Portland, Oregon, one of the most liberal, secular cities in America. This is a pretty unusual partnership. We know that. Together, they're now doing something unprecedented. 500 local churches are providing 26,000 volunteers, a small army, helping the city do everything from renovating parks to counseling victims of sex trafficking to feeding the homeless. Members of one church have adopted this struggling school, doing yard work, clothing drives, even helping rebuild the crumbling bleachers.
They're not always passing out tracts, they're not proselytizing, but they're simply asking, what do you need and how can we help?
These believers say they are the new face of American evangelicalism.
The old model was preaching to the choir, so to speak.
But that does not mean there are not still major philosophical differences. These aren't heavy disagreements. I don't know what Kevin's feelings are on homosexuality, but there are a lot of evangelicals who feel that an essential part of who you are is sin. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it's not lost on me, and I'm sure that is Kevin's view. But we also have massive agreement around needing to help people who are not currently being served. And they say this willingness to lock arms, despite deep philosophical disagreements, is a model that can work in other places too. Like, for example, Washington, D.C. Dan Harris, ABC News, Portland, Oregon.
Yes, that would be good in Washington, D.C. and many other places. Well, maybe we could start, Mayor Adams and Kevin, with a little bit more just the context of Portland, distinctives, just so everyone gets a picture.
So Portland is the 29th largest city in the United States. It is second most in terms of the percentage of the population that volunteers, has one of the highest voter registrations, and some of the highest voter turnout. It is with its money, Portlanders are some of the most generous people. That gives you a sense this is an actively and involved city. On the political side, it's very liberal. It's a very liberal city. It's the least church city in the United States. About less than 10%, 10% of Portlanders regularly attend church. A higher percentage view themselves of having a spiritual life. But to give you a context for this partnership, this kind of a partnership, we have 36 breweries in the city, and we have a devotion to quality of life, and we are, I think, big-hearted sort of people, but it's a secular, liberal, mostly secular, mostly liberal city. That's the context for this partnership. So when Kevin and his father and his friend, his leadership team approached me for the very first time about this idea, honestly, I thought I was, being punked. I thought it was a joke. I mean, I knew it wasn't a joke, but I did look for the camera around there.
Kevin, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess it would be. We also felt a certain sense of I guess the same thing. We didn't know if we would be received in a way. I think we both had a similar uneasiness of, can this work? But our heart, I think we tried to, if you can remember, we tried to come in with a genuine sense of humility. It was not faked, put on humility. We did feel embarrassed that we had never had this conversation and that we were known exclusively for being anti this and anti that, and that we were not viewed as part of the solution to issues or problems. And I think the turnaround in these last 4.5 years has been incredible. It's the level of relationship is almost overwhelming. I would love to have you share a bit on the school side, for example. I'd love to kind of get your sense, because that's probably the most grassroots aspect of this season of service. And again, it's not this big weekend where everyone shows up. It's really more helping the church be the church, 1,000 points of light kind of a thing. And the partnership between churches and individual public schools has just kind of gone nuts. What have you seen from that?
And I would just validate that was the reason I could get over being startled about the offer. Was it really was an open sort of palms offer. And mayors don't get that kind of offer very often from any group. So I understood the possibilities right away. And nowhere was it needed, that partnership needed more than an education. We have a terrible dropout rate, 8th graders that do not go on to graduate from high school in our city. We measure it in a very brutally honest way. But we know where we're failing folks. And so one of the first partnerships was a suburban church, Southlake, evangelical suburban church, offered to partner with Roosevelt High School, and you saw our superintendent from Roosevelt High School, to clean up the facility so that it was a place that seemed like if you worked there or you attended school there, that it was a place that the community actually viewed as valuable. And so that was one of the first things, but then that was followed on by mentorships, lots of mentorships, a lot of offerings for group activities. And the initial concern that we had was that there would somehow be recruiting into the church as part of this, but Southlake was very clear. This was about community service, and they seemed incredibly genuine about that. And for us, it was a certain amount of risk-taking. We got cell phone numbers of everyone involved, if there was ever, any worry about that. We've never had a problem. 4 or 5 years later, we've never had a problem. And for the first time, and this was part of a bigger effort with the community of faith based on our work with Roosevelt, that we created a county-wide organization called All Hands Raised that includes community of faith and a whole bunch of other community leaders. For the first time in 10 years, we've increased the high school graduation rate in 4 years by 6%. And that's the first time in like 20 years. So.
And just to give you a taste for many of you, I'm sure are, if you're not leading churches, you're on a church staff or a key lay leader. And this South Lake story, South Lake is by Portland standards, I mean, by Atlanta standards, it's not a large church, but in Portland, a couple thousand is a pretty large church. And they were kind of on the road to doing the typical megachurch dream of, we got acreage, we're going to raise $20 million and go build a bigger building, and that was their dream. They said, find us a season of service project. We don't see a lot of heavy needs right in our fairly affluent suburb. So the Roosevelt Partnership didn't start out as a long-term dream. It started out as a cleanup day, and they did a great job. They brought 1,500 people. You were there, Sam, and a number of the city commissioners were there cleaning up. But the thing that happened that was dramatic, and you see this, Chip, I know, in church partnerships with schools in Atlanta as well, is that the people just fell in love with Roosevelt. Despite cultural differences and 22 miles, Roosevelt was built for 1,600 students. It was down to 450 because anybody that could get their kid out of Roosevelt had done so. There was no active football team because the grandstands had been condemned. Now, what happened was the volunteers were coming so often that the principal said to Christine, who was the outreach pastor at South Lake, "You're here every day. You should just office here." Now there are 2 full-time staff paid by South Lake that office at Roosevelt High School that run the Head Start clothing closet, food pantry. Former NFL quarterback Neil Lomax, who's a member at South Lake, is the offensive coordinator for the football team. Nike execs from South Lake got Nike involved. They've totally rebuilt the track and the grandstands. It's the envy of Portland Public Schools. That's what led Superintendent Carol Smith, who's also an active part of the gay community in Portland, to say, we need that. Find us a church partner for every school in Portland Public Schools. And so it's again, it's like one thing leads to another, and it's been incredible now. In the next 5 years, we're hoping not just Portland, but Beaverton and Gresham and Vancouver and all the surrounding suburban districts have said the same thing. Because there's trust, because they understand that the schools are not the place to be sharing the good news, we've proven that, without us saying that there isn't a place to share the good news. We're proudly evangelical. We haven't had to hide the fact, I think Sam would say, right? We are still who we are, and we love to tell people about Jesus Christ, but trust comes when there's the right time and the place for that, and other times when it's going to cause problems. And thank the Lord for the churches in Portland that get it.
So the bottom line really is you've built relationship and trust. That really undergirds everything in terms of working together. Kevin, maybe talk a little bit more about just the churches and how have they responded. First of all, churches aren't known to work together too well in a city. And on top of that, to work together with government, and then on top of that, with a person who's in government that has a really different worldview. And so how have churches kind of responded to that?
It's all right, you can say it. I'm not offended.
The gay mayor.
The gay mayor.
Thank you, Sam, for making us all just take a deep breath.
Okay,
it's okay.
take a deep breath.
Calm down. No, it's good. No, I'd say in Portland, we know we have no political power. We cannot aspire to political power. It's not an option that we can, by force of mobilizing ourselves that way. And because it's not an option, I think it's kind of a benefit to us in a way, in that. And again, I'm not trying to say, don't misunderstand that I'm saying that Christians should not be part of the political process. Absolutely should. But I think we've been able to focus on the relationships because our heart is really for the gospel flourishing in Portland, the good news of Jesus Christ being seen as good news, even by the LGBTQ community, the gay and lesbian community, to have what would it take for them to see us as good news people and not anything else. And so I think the churches have that sense of we have to work together because there aren't tons and tons of us. So there's about 400 churches younger churches like Imago Dei with Rick McKinley, who's really instrumental in this, or Solid Rock, a new church of about 6,000, and then many smaller, struggling churches. And I think Sam has made it, though, incredibly easy. I think, frankly, more credit goes to Sam and the mayor's office and the city commissioners and county commissioners and school superintendents who've been willing to trust us, is what I would say. And I guess I would love to hear you, Sam, on what kind of feedback have you gotten? We talked about this at a barbecue like a year ago where you asked me, what's your constituency's response been to this partnership? And when I said, great, no problems, you were like, really? Oh, wow, that's not the case for me. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, again, I'll start more broadly in answering your question. I mean, one of the personal lessons that I've learned from this partnership, there have been a number, and they've been incredibly positive, but one of them that I think is broadly applicable is a reminder at how much we have relied on the mass media as our conduit of communication, and just how poorly that has served us individually as various groups, whatever you want to, affinity group you want to belong to, but specifically between the evangelical church and the gay movement. I mean, we suffer the same kind of media coverage you suffer from. I mean, if we always, when there's stock footage, it's usually, gay pride parades and the most salacious kind of stuff, and you often are led, and your calling card is the Westboro Baptist Church, nothing, which does not have a good response for a lot of folks in the nation. And so we both get, the extremes of all of our movements become like, what is our calling card, not put forth by us necessarily, either one of us, but put forth by the media. And so that, what I've learned, that intellectually, that folks in this audience are just like, in many ways, just like I am. But it's so easy to forget that in an emotional way. And what I've seen in our partnership, for example, with public servants, elected public servants in Portland, is just see that melt away so quickly, and that it starts with proximity and relationship, and it starts with partnership and doing some things together. And now that we've specifically brought leaders of the evangelical community around the table with leaders of the LGBT community, we're seeing that melt away quickly as well. I've not asked Kevin to change his mind on anything. He's not asked me to change my mind on anything. We haven't had to, because there is so much we agree on that is left undone. My attitude, first, let's get all that done, and then we'll sit down and talk about this other stuff. But until then, we don't get the luxury of skipping over. The luxury of skipping over all the unmet needs. And whether you just want to be a good person or a good Christian, what I really like about this partnership is the action nature of it. And the partnership, what comes out of that partnership is real relationship.
Friends, this is what we as the body of Christ and churches need to be doing. This is a beautiful picture and a great example of, it doesn't mean, as they both said, that we negate who we are. We're still who we are, and we can find points of commonality to work together, particularly on the needs around in our city. So anyway, I just commend both of you, and it's really encouraging to be with you today. Sam, maybe share a little bit more of your personal journey. I know in hearing you just a few hours ago about Episcopalian growing up, but kind of how has this changed or not your view of the church?
So I'm from a small town in Oregon called Newport, Oregon, which is a fishing town, timber town, born into a family, single mom, 4 kids, high school dropout. My grandfather came from Ireland as a Catholic, made sure we were all baptized Episcopalian. So I've grown up with the Episcopal Church. In Oregon, it's a very small church, powerful church, but a very small church. But growing up through all that as well, when the evangelical, at least as it was portrayed and put together, certain churches in the evangelical community put forward a number of statewide ballot measures in the 80s and 90s on gay rights, on choice, on a number of other issues. And so for about 2 decades, there was just every election cycle this war going on in the media and in the community over these issues. And we got through all that, and it was sorted out the way it was sorted out. But I was left, as an openly gay man, I was left with a very negative view of the evangelical church. And it was based on what was near me, not just based on sort of national coverage. And then having lived in Eugene, after moving from Portland, Eugene, and Portland, these are liberal cities, and so the opportunity to have relationship or to talk to folks in the church was really limited. And so this has been great for me because it's opened up a whole new sort of category of friendships. It's been good for me personally to have that. I've been able to sit down with other folks that I know sort of have a similar sort of outlook on the evangelical church, or did as I did, sit down, say, no, you really can come to a meeting with evangelical church leaders. And they're like, oh, really?
Are you sure?
Are you sure? Have you been converted or brainwashed, Sam? Those kinds of things. The fear is really, really real. And so it's been great to act on that. It's been great to see truly you get good people together in a room and you say, the focus is on what do we agree about? And the conversation goes on and on and on. It can go on and on and on. If you leave it without that intention and you just sort of leave it to the natural sort of mass media and sort of daily talk shows, which have to make money, they have a role, but they have to focus on the dissidents. They have to focus on what the disagreement is about. They have to focus on where the conflict is. And that's all part of life, and that's really important that those discussions happen. But what's been missing, what I found in my own life, is what's been missing is relationship, friendship with people that I don't totally agree with. But boy, the stuff we do agree on, how satisfying, incredibly satisfying.
It's all about relationships. That's great. Sam, maybe in synopsis a little bit, and then we're going to open the floor to just questions from you all. Group of evangelical leaders here, pastors, church staff, some nonprofit leaders, maybe some others. What would you say as it relates to working together in collaboration, what not to do and maybe what to do? And I know you've talked about this, but if you could kind of pull it in a nutshell, what do you want to say? Don't do this. Be sure and do this.
I think that the power of well, first off, taking stock of what you realistically can do beyond what you're already doing in an effort like this, and sort of thinking about that, just sort of your capacity, your ability. And interest is okay too. But then going to mayors, going to county chairs, going to school superintendents, or usually I would start at those levels. There might be different words for them in each community, different titles, and saying, we want to help. This is what we have. We have some ideas, but really we want to listen to what are your biggest concerns? What are the largest unmet needs in your school district, your county, or your city? And then listen to them and let them get back to you, have quite a few conversations about what the needs are and what is possible in terms of this great gift. And then talk about, right up front, talk about, what are the protocols of engagement. Folks in government are going to be very concerned, like in schools especially, about recruitment or proselytizing or those kinds of things. Showing a good example as a Christian in the school and somebody is attracted to your church, great. But that wall is really important for most public schools. And then start not so small that you're not inspired by your own work, and that doesn't make some sort of difference. Usually a physical, I think the way, and that was really out of the church side, starting, cleaning up an old school before school opened made a huge psychological impact on folks. It's like, wow, somebody matters. Somebody cares about us, said the teachers and the parents and the kids. But then also doing something that's harder, and that's more the ongoing sort of mentorship or partnership. Those are some things. The first in all that is, though, ask. You'd be surprised how many people, sorry, I shouldn't say ask. You'd be surprised how many people don't offer. without something that's in it for them. That's really like they want their brand, they want their name up there, they want, you know, the genuine open palmed offer is really, really rare.
That's good. Well, how about if we'll open it up? I don't know if there's a microphone out there, but open up some questions for these guys. Yeah.
I have a microphone.
Yeah, yeah, we can.
One is Vern. I'm from Sonoma County, California, Northern California, which I imagine is somewhat like Portland. One of the big problems we have there, besides not enough breweries, there's only like 7. Is that the church, especially conservative churches, doesn't think of themselves as part of the community. We isolate ourselves. We make a lot of jokes about sort of the liberal atmosphere that we're in. Is that something that your church has experienced in Portland? And since you've started doing this, do they really get a sense that they're part of Portland, that they're part of that community, or is it still kind of business, charity?
No, it's. I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the things I'd intended to say was that's been a radical change. And the question, I think most of you could hear that, was in his context that there's just this sense of isolation. The church is not seen as part of the community. I'd say that's changed dramatically. The passage, if you've got that little green kind of report of season of service, on the inside cover is that well-known passage from Jeremiah 29:7 that says, "Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I've carried you. Pray to the Lord for it, for if it prospers, you too will prosper." And that word shalom is the Hebrew word, this very rich word for that's kind of put into English, peace and prosperity. That's kind of been the rallying cry and verse for our church community in the Portland area. What would it look like? And again, I'll do a quick theological aside here, Sam, but you remember that verse was written to the Jewish community in exile in Babylon. So they're in this cultural context similarly of, we've been taken into captivity, we're not part of this community. So the natural tendency, what do we tend to do? It's either a fight kind of mentality or a withdrawal. And what God's saying to them in that context, and we believe still today, is neither of those approaches are fully Christ-like and biblical. It's this seeking together with others the peace and prosperity of Portland. So by rallying together around that with the churches, we've kind of maintained a sense of unity around it. And bit by bit by bit, not only is it not that we feel part of the community, we've had to literally hire some extra staff. There are so many needs and so many, every think tank and roundtable now related to hunger and homelessness and healthcare and reducing the dropout rate that the city or county, et cetera, has. There's now a sense of, we need the faith community, we need the evangelical community to help solve these problems. Because I think you've said before, sometimes it's working. We show up. I mean, that's who shows up with resources. So that verse has been kind of a galvanizing principle for us. And I guess my prayer for any of our communities would be, what would it take for pastors and leaders to adopt that kind of a mentality? Not so much isolation or fighting, but we're commanded to seek the peace and prosperity. And that's how the good news, the gospel, will be seen and heard. And again, we're an evangelistic organization. Luis Palau, my dad's an evangelist. It's not like we've become a different organization that now doesn't care about proclaiming the good news. It's just that we think that holistic word and deed approach does so many other positive things. I'll repeat the question each time. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, Kevin, in my experience, I've found that when you enter into intentional community with people that don't share the same worldview, that a lot of times you start to be affected by the community that you're intentionally involving yourself in. And so, looking at the Christian community that has intentionally involved itself with the gay and lesbian community, partnering to help the city, have you seen in any way maybe their views of God and how God relates with man changing? Can you speak to that, please?
I guess I would say it's probably too soon to tell. I would say at that big kind of macro level. At the individual level, I think every one of dozens and dozens of different individual churches are absolutely seeing individual life change at that personal one-on-one relational thing. So again, we view it as helping the church be the church, helping, whether it's a big church or small church, get their people out of the pews and into the community. That ends up creating lots of different personal relationships. And I think we all know that in any kind of evangelism or gospel sharing, that's the rubber meets the road context. So there's lots of individual stories there, but I wouldn't say that, that we've even really been thinking of it so much on the macro scale. It's sort of early relationship building, creating partnerships and a comfort with each other, so that then absolutely individual believers are maybe more confident in who they are. One of our goals in this whole thing was to reduce some of the stereotypes so that there would even be the possibility of new relationships developing. I don't know if that answers your... Great.
Yes, sir.
I love what you said, Mary Adams, about we have so much that we agree on that needs to be done that we don't have the time to get to this other stuff. So when I hear you say partnerships, I hear a partnership with the school, a partnership with here. And what I'm wondering is, in the process of this, I keep hearing the churches are going out and doing this, but is everybody getting involved in doing this? I mean, is everybody getting involved doing the work, or it's not just the church people going out and doing it? That's what I was wondering,
No, I mean, there's a couple of ways I'd answer that. In the most positive sense, it sort of shamed other community groups to step it up. So because I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it was like, wow, they really deliver, and they're not asking for, Roosevelt High School brought to you by South Lake Church, on the basketball court or whatever. And so it has inspired and shamed others to get involved, and reminded folks that, most in Portland, only about 17%, let's say the school example, about 70% of Portland families have kids in the public schools. And the rest are older or younger or what have you. But it really woke up because a lot of the volunteers from the seasons of service on the church side not only didn't have kids at Roosevelt, they didn't have kids in school at all. And so I thought that was just incredibly healthy, and that's why I'd like to go to events like this. We go to events like this inside the city and inside the region to come on, folks. I don't mind a friendly shaming from, now and then, if it's for a good cause, and a lot of other folks have stepped up. So now the All Hands Raised, which is a group of, we reworked a number of different things, really comes out of bringing the community in Portland back to the schools. We had the opportunity to have a good public education. It's now, we can't just leave it up to the teachers, we can't just leave it up to the kids and the parents. The whole community has to support their success because, they're out of, there's a new class graduating every year, and their success or failure has an immediate impact on our city. So the ripple effect of example of this effort, positive example, cannot be understated.
Mayor, what kind of tension did you experience? Did you experience any tension early on with anyone being early adopters or people that were just kind of standoffish to jumping in with this partnership?
So the question, I forget to keep repeating the question. Yeah, the question is, what kind of maybe pushback or tension did you feel from others about this?
Yeah, in the liberal community, we've talked a lot about the gay community, LGBT community, but it really, our work bringing together evangelical community and the leadership of the gay community really has happened more recently. Our early work was just with fellow electeds, fellow progressives, those kinds of things. And yeah, there was even pushback then about how can we trust them not to try to recruit my kid? And why are you, Liberal Sam, signing up partnerships with, and I apologize if people are from the church, but in my community it's not a good it's not considered a good thing is like, why are you signing up for partnerships with the Westboro-like churches? And there was pushback, and I would sit down with folks and I would talk it through, and I would just say, we have too many unmet needs and we have too much ground that we agree on to simply remain in our respective corners. And this might not be acting for everybody. It might not be acting on your religious beliefs. At the very least, you should be acting on your beliefs of what it means to be a good human being. And it seemed to turn some folks around, at least keep the revolution from overtaking me. And then the examples and the work quickly convince people.
Yes, sir.
Being from a small town in Alabama that is nothing like Portland, this question is for you, Kevin. How did you get churches on board with this movement? Because
this would not fly in small town Alabama? Yeah. Yeah, the question is, again, a different cultural context. How in the world did it work? I think that we were blessed in Portland with, the Palau Association and Dad in particular, is trusted by the evangelical community in Portland. There was a sense, Dad's going to be 78 next month. This is a guy that's given his life for the gospel all around the world. So there was no kind of sense of like, who's this new quirky, emergent guy that maybe doesn't believe the Bible anymore, and that's why he's doing it. There was a sense of like, well, wait, Luis Palau, who's a great friend of Sam's, and Dad and Sam have spent lots of time together, talking and praying, and so there's kind of that. Well, Luis Palau clearly stands for the gospel. He's not compromising that. His intent with we do these big festivals and. I was always kind of joke, hey, you need to know, Luis Palau's going to do what Luis Palau does, and he's going to get up there and talk about Jesus Christ, and we would say the best gift we could give someone in Portland is, from our perspective, a relationship with Jesus Christ. So that wasn't compromised. So I think the churches had that trust that we're not giving that up. It's just a matter of we have so many barriers that have been built up. No one's listening or hearing that it's a loving gospel that we have. And so I guess they would say, if you can get some folks that have the right credibility, it's leadership like anything else. If something is led by the right kind of leader that people have confidence in, that they've not just abandoned historic biblical truth or something like that, then it makes everything kind of easier. So I'll admit that we had a little bit of a jump start there. We built this whole thing on the back of a Palau festival, which already was drawing together like 400 churches and 50,000 people a day to Waterfront Park for this Christian music and the gospel. So that combination meant the churches felt this is for us. But hopefully then, because of the season of service, Sam was there on the platform and,
But I would also, as someone who's been in public service for 31 years, an elected position or work for chief of staff for mayor, and so for 12 years and elected for another 8 is, don't underestimate going to the person in charge, at least the elected person in charge, and saying, this is what we have, this is how, these are some skills we think we have, how can we help? And remember, what's going on in their head is all the sort of questions that naturally come with sort of a potentially new partnership. But somewhere towards the end of that thinking while they're smiling at you is, oh my goodness, what if I say no?
And I'll say one other quick thing on that is that, most cities, Portland is Portland, and so we've got these quirky kinds of things. Most other cities, in terms of this community service kind of things, some other small towns aren't going to have some of the same issues initially either. You may not be in a context where there's the barriers maybe to jump over at the beginning maybe aren't as high either on the positive side. Yes, sir.
First of all, Mayor, I would say I commend you because I don't know that there are very many leaders within our nation that would trust the church like this, and so I would just say thank you for that. And then, have there been any strategies or systems that have been placed in place, and God forbid you're not in that leadership position anymore? What happens with the next generation
Yeah, so the question is, great, so Mayor Adams is here. He's actually not running again, so we're sadly in our last few months of the Mayor Adams regime. Yes.
I'll see you on the golf course.
Yeah. The encouraging answer to that is, because the credibility and relationships have been there, we actually hosted, Imago Dei Community, one of our leading evangelical churches, hosted a civic forum for the three mayoral candidates early in the process. That was kind of the level of community that there was, is that they came to us. We had 500 pastors and leaders there, and it wasn't a debate. It was just a let's get to know one another. So now it's down to two candidates, Charlie Hales and Jefferson Smith, and both have already firmly, publicly, positively said this will continue.
And I introduced them. I mean, I did the introduction, and we also are working on, the city is working, it's Nick's project is with a member of the city council, one of them who isn't up for re-election right now. So we've got a couple of different tracks to continue it moving forward.
One last question. You've been very patient.
So I'm from North Carolina, and up until about May, trying to build relationships with the LGBTQ community was difficult, but still doable. And then North Carolina passed Amendment 1, banning gay marriage. And since then, I have just sensed those perceptions that the media puts forth, or those walls, have gotten even bigger or amplified, or there's less and less discussion and less relationship because of this thing that happened in May, whether or not you agree with it or not. So I'm just wondering how, for both of you, Mayor and Louise, how would you suggest, like, we move through that noise, and really, how can we get the church to, like, start listening again? And how can I, reach out to this community and ask them to, like, to listen as well?
Yeah, I'll start. And the question was, this is a person from North Carolina, and talking about what was in ballot, anyway, a ballot measure that just was passed there, as far as definition of marriage between a man and a woman, and that relationships that were maybe kind of beginning friendship-wise, whatever, between at least some Christ followers and the gay and lesbian community have kind of gone down again. So what to do? I mean, I don't know what can be done other than that in the trenches relational side of things, because as we've seen here, it's only as people get to know one another that some of the initial stereotypes go away, and then you're back to, we're both people, I love Jesus Christ, I'm an evangelical, I want everyone to know Jesus Christ. I mean, Sam has heard Dad preach the gospel, and I mean, we're not kind of ashamed of that, and yet we're looking to find common ground. We had a meeting, and you can maybe talk about this a little bit too. We did have a meeting that Sam referenced briefly, where I brought together quietly a handful of evangelical pastors, and Sam brought together some influential leaders in the gay and lesbian community, not to try to find common ground on gay marriage, for example. In fact, Sam did a great job starting off the meeting, saying to kind of your constituency, this is not about that. We can't find common ground on that. But let's just kind of tell our stories and get to know one another, because surely as Christ followers, that's a better approach. Again, we don't have to be in agreement to be friendships. So.
Yeah, and I think that I appreciate you asking the question. I think that I'm sure you understand, but to reinforce, I mean, it's very painful for the LGBT community to go through these kinds of public ballot measures and these kinds of public debate. It's hurtful. I'm passionately for gay marriage. The fact that someone might be passionately against it, it matters how we both deal with our opinions. I think both sides have a responsibility to also be self-critical when the extremists of both sides go too far. You can disagree in a compassionate way. And so that is what I'm hoping. This Seasons of Service is about much more than the relationship between the evangelical community and the gay community. But on that score, the reason that we've done enough years work together that we felt we could bring that particular discussion around the table to start is we had some So just know that it will take time, and I think that continuing to, to not give up in their anger, which is understandable from their point of view. I see a lot of hope around that, of all sides of these issues, of not letting the extremists rule the day. I mean, we had a conservative church in Portland that was vandalized in really anti-Christian vandalization. And one of the first people in the community to stand up and say this is absolutely wrong was the president of our gay community center. And for me, that was, all right. And she was at that meeting, and that she probably came to that meeting with that point of view, but the fact that she stood up and said, this isn't right. This is not the way you disagree. We can disagree honorably. We can disagree with grace. And that's, I can't police the evangelical community in that, and I shouldn't. But I can, for example, in the gay community, have my voice to keep things respectful.
I know we need to wrap things up. Could we give a big thanks to Mayor Adams and Kevin Palau?